Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us today as we continue our exciting seminar series. I am Dr. Carlos Bosques, CEO at the Food Allergy Science Initiative, or FASI for short, and I am excited to welcome you to today's seminar series. Today's seminar is sponsored by Top 9 Proteins, who is a premier source of high quality, clinical grade food proteins. And for more information, please visit them at top9proteins.com. This is a special year for FOSSI. It is our 10-year anniversary. 10 years, we celebrate 10 years of research and exciting progress in the science of food allergies. And we're going to have a big celebration in October. So please stay tuned for more information on our 10-year anniversary. More information will be coming up soon. At FASI, our focus is to understand, translate, and intervene with food allergies. And as a leader of food allergy research, FASI is dedicated to advancing the breakthrough discoveries to transform the lives of people with food allergies. While food allergies impact millions of people across the world, understanding the disease and the availability of effective treatments still remain a limitation. This year, we have prepared an exciting seminar series titled The Allergy Equation: Clinical Trials Shaping the Future. During this series, we're exploring the latest advancements in clinical trials and therapeutic development efforts impacting the future of food allergies. And we've put together an exciting lineup of speakers who are focusing on discussing emerging therapies and examining the challenges and success in recent clinical trials. Whether you are a patient, a clinician, a researcher, or just curious about food allergies, we hope this seminar series provide helpful information to all of you. As we begin, I would like to clarify that FASI is a science-driven, evidence-based, and therefore uh, uh, thorough in our communications and science. Throughout this series, our intent is not to promote any products or companies, but instead to inform our audience on recent clinical development efforts for food allergies, and also to have the opportunity to ask questions to better understand the benefits and the challenges of different emerging options. So today I am thrilled to be joined by Dr. Edwin Kim. Dr. Edwin Kim is an associate professor and the division chief of Pediatric Allergy and Immunology at UNC School of Medicine. He's a physician scientist, excuse me, a physician scientist specializing in the field of pediatric allergy and immunology. He's also the director of Allergy and Immunology and Fellowship Training Program at UNC School of Medicine. And Dr. Kim is also director of the UNC Food Allergy Initiative. Dr. Kim's research focuses on multiple aspects of food immunotherapy, including its safety and tolerability. Dr. Kim received his undergraduate degree from MIT, his Master's of Science from Harvard School of Public Health, and his doctorate from University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. And Dr. Kim has been involved in many of the trials involving oral immunotherapy, sublingual immunotherapy, and epicutaneous immunotherapy. And he's an expert on this field. And we thought it would be very helpful to have Dr. Kim with us to explain more of what he's seeing in those trials, what he has learned on those trials, which I know many people in our audience have had questions on this field. So Edwin, it's really a pleasure to have you. It's really always nice to talk to you and learn from you. Really an honor to have you here with us today.
Oh, I'm very excited to be part of this. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Um, Dr. Kim, we would actually, before we begin, I always ask, our speakers to give a little more background to our audience, how you got to where you are, why are you doing the research that you're doing, and what motivates you?
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to keep it brief, but I think I've grown up around allergy. I didn't, realize it was going to be a career. I think within sort of my family with asthma and seasonal allergies and even some early food allergy. But it really wasn't until sort of college, undergraduate, and later where I started to become interested in the immune system and sort of the idea that how could this perfect immune system that can fight off all these different pathogens and stuff screw up, basically have problems and overreact to things in allergy or even attack itself in autoimmunity. And then fast forward to sort of working in some clinics, and then an actually very informative talk that I heard from Dr. Burks, sort of describing oral allergy syndrome and sort of how IgE works and some of the crossover. And it really just had me won over to understand sort of this disease that seemingly is affecting so many people, and why does it happen and how can we do something about it?
Thank you. Thank you, Edwin. Um, you have worked with oral immunotherapy, epicutaneous immunotherapy, sublingual immunotherapy, a lot of the clinical trials that have been ongoing recently. Can you explain to our audience what are the differences, why people develop three different types of immunotherapy, and what are some of the advantages and concerns of the therapies?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me share some slides that I put together to try to help the conversation. And so, yeah, you mentioned just immunotherapy. My guess is most people that are listening are probably familiar, but just to make sure we're talking about the same thing. When I think of food immunotherapy, really in my mind, what we're talking about is this gradually increasing exposure to the food itself, what you're allergic to, with the goal of really treating and protecting against allergic reactions from that particular food. As you mentioned, the three forms that we've studied the most, oral immunotherapy, also known as OIT, involves ingesting the actual food you're allergic to, epicutaneous immunotherapy, applying the allergen to the skin, and then sublingual immunotherapy, where we actually put the allergen under the tongue. Um, Now, with immunotherapy, again, folks are probably familiar, but it's important to keep in mind that this exposure therapy, if we give people a large dose of what they're allergic to, of course, they're going to have an allergic reaction. And so immunotherapy typically involves a buildup. So starting from a very, very low dose exposure, increasing over a period of time, and then long-term exposure or treatment with a maintenance dose. And so here in the picture, you sort of see this ladder stepwise kind of representation of what this could look like. This particular picture is from oral immunotherapy, but for epicutaneous and sublingual, there may be similar. Now, before we get into a little bit more information, I do think it's important for us to sort of level set on what we're talking about when we're thinking of treatments and actually what response could look like. So most commonly, the word that we use is desensitization, and I'll use that throughout the talk. And here, what I'm talking about is increasing how much food it takes to actually trigger a reaction, increasing that threshold. But it really is dependent on staying on therapy, staying exposed to the food itself. Sustained unresponsiveness, or sometimes the word remission, are also commonly used now. And what this is talking about is treating, desensitizing, but then when you discontinue, when you stop the therapy, stop the exposure, that benefit exists or lasts for a period of time, sometimes weeks or even months afterwards. May not be permanent, but at least for a short period of time can last. And then finally, the gold standard, the goal that we all want to get to is tolerance. So a long-term sort of non-reactivity, you don't have to eat the food, don't need exposure. Essentially, what we're talking about there is cure, which is, of course, our ultimate goal. And so, I mentioned you mentioned about sort of the different modalities, why we have them. I think the best way to start is talking with OIT, which we've studied more than any other therapy that's out there. We know that it can be effective for desensitization. And so on the left, what you see is the phase 3 Palisade study. This was a study treating with 300 milligrams of peanut, one peanut's worth every day for a year compared against placebo. And the dark bars make it clear these are treatment responders versus placebo, which are the light blue. And it's pretty obvious, again, strong treatment response that we see here. So in a large multi-center, multinational study, we found that OIT, peanut OIT, can effectively treat. On the right is maybe just an even more exciting study called the IMPACT study, where we tried peanut oral immunotherapy, OIT, in toddlers. And first of all, what we found were the thresholds achieved, these kids were able to eat full serving sizes of the food, a big chunk of them. But then equally exciting was stopping the therapy for 6 months, and a subset of those patients were still able to safely be able to eat a large amount of peanut, demonstrating what we have called 6-month remission as well. So great news with OIT, but unfortunately, what we know is that OIT is held back by a considerable risk. And so we are exposing the kids to what they're allergic to. And so this systematic review demonstrated that when you're doing OIT, you have a much higher chance of having anaphylaxis, a much more frequent episodes of anaphylaxis, as well as needing to use epinephrine. So clearly some safety problems that come with OIT. But perhaps more important right now in this day and age is going to be really access. And so OIT is very hard to do. And so thereby it really limits who can actually do it. And so OIT, first of all, from a dosing point of view, it needs to be every day, but you need to do it on a full stomach. You're supposed to avoid exercise and hot showers. You're supposed to be somewhere where you can be observed for 2 hours after dosing. For a lot of busy kids, busy adolescents, this can be difficult. It involves really, because of the risk, it involves lots of in-office visits. 10 to 12 visits over 6 months would be a typical protocol. A lot of folks, because of work or time, or maybe single parents or multiple siblings, this is very, very difficult to do. Um, and then only a small number of allergists offer OIT at the moment. And so that nearest allergist may not be close. You may have to go quite a while, or that person may have significant wait lists. And then the safety concerns, like I mentioned, so urgent visits may be needed. So can you drop things to be able to go, um, for a visit? And then from the provider side, on-call availability is essential. And so really the way I think about it is OIT has shown us, yeah, we can treat food allergy, and this is what it looks like. Desensitization is very likely with OIT. Remission may even be possible, but again, it's limited to a subset of that food allergy population because of this risk and administration. So the next generation immunotherapy really should learn from OIT. So not ignore it, but learn from OIT, but then move on to the next generation with a focus on access to a broader food allergy population. And so, I mentioned before about epicutaneous through the skin. And so peanut epid or epicutaneous immunotherapy, what this involves is sort of a continuous low dose medicine patch. It interacts directly with the immune system, in this case, in the skin. And really the goal here is to prioritize simplicity and safety from the patient perspective. And so there's a single dose patch. There's no sort of multiple doses. And the way the dosing is controlled is how long you actually wear the patch. And then it can irritate the skin, so it's rotated across 6 sites. But overall safety should be pretty good with it. Sublingual immunotherapy, which I mentioned before, here what we're talking about is a peanut protein extract that's diluted in glycerin. And then this is administered directly to the immune system in the mouth. And so we are able to use a lot lower doses than OIT. So hopefully, again, improving on safety, but in this case, without really sacrificing any of the efficacy. Like you see in the picture, it's dosed using a pump bottle held under the tongue and then swallowed. And the doses we've used for sublingual immunotherapy about 2 to 4 milligrams, which is about 1/75th of one peanut. So very small exposure compared to the one to even 10 peanuts on a daily basis that we may do for oral. And then the safety also gives the potential for potential home updosing that we could have with this treatment.
Thank you, Evan. That's fantastic. Um, Great to see the differences at the clinical level. You have been involved in many of the clinical trials and have a better comparison of effectiveness, safety, and tolerability. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about the results from the trials and the clinical trials that are ongoing to compare so that we can inform them better their options that they have?
Absolutely. And so with OIT, again, previously I showed you that slide that ultimately led to FDA approval of a peanut oral immunotherapy product. So, there I think it's, known that it works, but, I'll focus on the epicutaneous immunotherapy and the sublingual immunotherapy and what data there might be to support these as alternatives. And so here are some data that we see with the peanut epicutaneous immunotherapy. The peanut patch is often what we call it. Two major studies that have occurred with this. One is called the PEPIT study, which is a 12-month-long phase 3 study, so also a multinational, multi-site study. Here focused on 4 to 11-year-old kids. And then those patients, that study was extended for a whole 3 years of treatment as well, which is depicted here in the slide. And so what you see is the median amount of peanut that it took to trigger a reaction at baseline was 144 milligrams, so basically a half of a peanut. After treatment, we're able to get patients up to 444 milligrams. So after 1 year, so maybe about 1.5, almost 2 peanuts worth. But what's also important is that as they continue to use the patch to get to year 2 and the year 3, we see that that benefit continues to increase, and in this case, up to 944 milligrams as well. So, it's easy to see that the patch is something that is simple and feasible to do for multiple years. And this data seems to suggest that there is a benefit at 1 year, and as you can stay on for 2 and 3 years, that benefit continues to improve. Now, I hinted at before the safety aspect. So we're putting allergen on the skin, accessing the immune system there. It makes sense that people might have some side effects on the skin. And so in this particular case, with the 3 years of treatment, about 80% of patients reported some side effects. But not surprisingly, almost all of them were on the skin. And importantly, in this case, only 1% of patients actually withdrew from the study from these side effects. So again, really supports the idea that this is something that from a safety point of view, it should be feasible for patients to maintain for a long period of time. Now, maybe more exciting data, especially with sort of a focus on early introduction and early intervention for patients with peanut allergy, is this study, the EPITOPE study. So they brought the peanut epit down to the toddler age, ages 1 to 4. And the data shown here shows that there was a 67% responder rate when we go down to the toddler age. And what does that mean in actual milligrams of peanut? Because again, it takes about maybe 1/3 one peanut to trigger a clinical reaction in someone who's allergic. And in this case, they represented about a median of 1,300 milligram increase in the amount of peanut it takes to trigger a reaction. So again, if it normally takes about 100 milligrams to trigger a reaction, and we're median increasing that by 1.3 grams. And so a significant increase that should more than protect patients who are on treatment with this patch. Like the other study, they extended this out for a couple of years, and what they found was, sure enough, in the toddlers, that benefit continues to increase with longer treatment. Now, how about the sublingual immunotherapy, so treatment underneath the tongue? And so here, what I show is the TLC study that we conducted here at the University of North Carolina. Here, this was focused on 1 to 11-year-olds, a median age of about 7. And we used a 4 milligram treatment dose, like I mentioned before, about 1/75 of one peanut, and treated for
Seems like we have lost Dr. Kim's connection. Let's give him a minute.
oh boy.
We lost you for about 60 seconds there,
Oh my
Edwin.
gosh. Okay, is that on my side?
Yeah, yes, I think we can continue. No worries. It's only about
Okay. Oh
60
gosh,
seconds.
I'm
Can you
super
still share
sorry
your?
about that. Should
Okay,
I
perfect. Oh,
yeah.
you're in the next slide. Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, I'm very embarrassed. I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
So just picking up where I was, again, shifting over to sublingual immunotherapy. And so here, again, what we looked at in what a study called the TLC study conducted here at the University of North Carolina, um, was that with 4 milligrams of treatment, we are able to get tremendous improvement. So up to 2,700 milligrams, so almost 10 peanuts worth of protection. And so far more than we would anticipate someone would get into accidentally. And 1/3 of these patients actually were able to eat a full serving size, 5 grams of peanut, with just a small 4 milligram daily treatment. Now, what's important that I always emphasize with this particular slide is there is a range of responses that's important to keep in mind. So the potential is very big, but at the same time, it is patients can be all over the place with those responses. So really important for us to find ways to further improve this benefit. Now, safety here. So again, side effects do happen. And so here we report about 4% of all doses total led to some side effects, but what we know for sublingual is that the most common side effect will be an itching in the mouth that goes away on its own over about 10 minutes. But thankfully, treatments or doses that require actual treatment, epinephrine and antihistamine, were very uncommon. Similar to what we saw with the epicutaneous, when we go to the younger kids, the toddlers, we see tremendous improvement as well. So in this case, 60% of patients on the sublingual were able to eat the full serving size, 5 grams that we had talked about, compared to only the 35% that we saw for the slightly older elementary school kids. And what's exciting here is similar to OIT, we looked at remission. In this case, only 3 months compared to 6 months for OIT, but nearly 50% of these patients 3 months after stopping the sublingual were still able to eat the full serving size of peanuts. So at least a potential for somewhat lasting benefit is there with sublingual as well. Now, oftentimes, once I show these slides, the next question that comes up is, well, which would you do? Like, which is the best one? And unfortunately, I have the wimpy answer here that, I don't know that there is a one size fits all when it comes to food allergy. I think as I talk to more patients, as I talk to more providers, what becomes obvious is that food allergy affects each person and each family really in unique ways. Maybe more, just as important though, is even in the same patient and the same family, that impact of food allergy changes over time. And so how food allergy affects a 1-year-old versus a 6-year-old starting kindergarten versus a kid that's starting high school or even going to college, it's easy to see how food allergy is going to impact those patients differently. Now, across the 3 treatments, I do think of OIT as being high risk and high reward. We can get patients to full serving size levels of protection, introducing it in the diet even possibly, but at the same time, it comes with a lot of risk and a very difficult treatment. The patch, epicutaneous, super simple to do, really, really good safety that's there. That benefit that you get may not be nearly as high as with the OIT as far as the level of protection, and introducing into the diet may not be as realistic for patients with epicutaneous. Sublingual, it's almost like the Goldilocks. It's maybe not as easy as the patch, but easier than OIT. The efficacy may not be as strong as OIT, kind of close, probably more than epicutaneous. And so sort of in the middle of the road when it comes to this. And I think if anything, I think it's exciting to talk of all 3 with our patients to see what might fit for sort of their family dynamic.
That's great, Edwin. So to summarize, to make sure I got it clear, which I know it's very important to all our audience. In summary, would you say OIT, high risk, high reward, patch would be good safety but less efficacious, and then the sublingual would be somewhere in between?
That's right. Yep.
Great. And so this is great. Great progress. A lot of people that have gone through OIT now have other options. What's missing? Have we now with these 3 options, have we solved all the questions and all the needs, or what's missing out there for our community?
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. I mean, I wish I could say that we were there. We've made tremendous progress, and the fact that we even have treatments to talk about is exciting, but there's still plenty of work to do. And so let me flip. And so, yeah, so I tried to put a couple slides anticipating the question. And so first, focus on immunotherapy. I think the product availability is a concern. It's something that's important for us to think about in the near-term future. So I mentioned previously that there is an FDA-approved peanut oral immunotherapy product, but this is we've been told is going to be going off the market at some point in this coming year. And so then what do we do? How do we move forward with OIT? Supermarket-based foods are used for OIT in some clinics, and maybe more once the FDA-approved product goes off the market. But there are some questions about the variability of these, and is it equally interchangeable? Is there changes in risks and benefits? We need to learn. Epicutaneous immunotherapy right now is a proprietary patch that is in development, and the exciting news is it seems to be approaching FDA submission. But outside of that, right now it's not available. There's not sort of a home way to make this at the moment. So exciting, but not accessible at the moment. And then for sublingual, so there are food extract products that are used for diagnostics, but they're not approved and not standardized, or not approved for sublingual treatment, and they're not standardized. And so there's some questions of variability that might be there too, and how significant or not might that be. There is a tablet-based sublingual approach that will be standardized that's in development, but it's still fairly early on along the way. So again, I think we have data supporting all three modalities, but availability of those products is going to be an important thing for us to think about over the next year or two to make sure our patients can get it. Yeah, I mentioned sort of the different treatment expectations. And so these long-term expectations remain poorly defined in my mind. So, across all three, we've shown that we can desensitize, we can increase that threshold, protect our kids. But at this point, it doesn't look like any of these modalities are able to get us to that tolerance, to that cure that we had mentioned about sort of at the beginning. I hope I'm wrong and I hope I'm surprised, but at the moment, the data that we see doesn't seem to show this. We've shown with OIT, we've shown with sublingual, the potential for this short-term remission for a few months. But what does that actually mean? So, how do we what does that actually mean in clinical practice and how do we build on that? And so that's an important piece for us to understand. And I put this sort of silly phrase here, forever is a long time, but it is a long time. And so if we're telling patients, you got to do this daily treatment, and it's not a cure, so you have to do it indefinitely, that's very discouraging. And so I do think we need to understand sort of what the long term means for these treatments so that we can talk to our patients and really properly guide them on what to do. Another factor in thinking about what's missing and what's next is that what we now know is that many of our patients are allergic to multiple foods. We focus on peanut as the model allergen for many years, but really, at this point, we recognize many patients have allergies to peanuts and tree nuts and milk and egg and all manner of other foods. And so the immunotherapies, as good as they may be, they're food specific. And so that will also limit them in patients that are multi-allergic. This is a place where the biologics may play a big role, and I think future discussions, on this webinar series will touch on that. Omalizumab was the anti-IgE therapy was approved in 2024, and there are other ones that are in development. One of the major benefits would be that they would be food agnostic, so potentially able to treat multiple foods simultaneously. Of course, the drawback for many, if not most of these, is that they're going to be by injection. And so that's where immunotherapies may still have an important role, being a non-injection generally. The time to benefit also is a factor that I think is important for us to address at this stage too. Again, we've shown that we could desensitize, but it may take months to years for that to occur. And then may require a food challenge for us to even know that it's even working. And so in some cases, that may be just too much for patients. And so are there things that we can do to boost the immunotherapies, whether they're adjuvants or additional therapies that can help them work faster, have stronger efficacy? I think that's an important area for us to study. And then there are some additional therapies specifically targeting mast cells and suppressing them, or even directly blocking the allergen or grabbing the allergen. These are approaches that have the promise of maybe having very, very rapid, within days type of onset of action. So really exciting area for us to study as well for different use cases than, say, immunotherapy or even the classic biologics. Again, just to summarize, I think the groundwork is set. OIT has shown us sort of that we can treat food allergy, giving us a sense of what that actually looks like. But really, again, it's that time now to focus on the next generation of treatments, and importantly, thinking beyond just the OIT clinics and the OIT patients, but really that broader food allergy population that's out there, coming up with treatments that can be accessible and available to the broader group.
Fantastic, Edwin. Thank you. Thank you so much for that great information. I know we receive a lot of questions on this topic, and we have a lot of questions here. Before we go to the Q&A, everyone always asks us, how can you help? Donation. Remember, we are a nonprofit organization that really depends just on donations, and your support is highly appreciated. You can host an event, follow us on social media, and join our next webinar series, which actually will be coming up pretty soon on February 12th at 12 p.m. by our friend Wayne Treffler from MGH, who will be talking about biting back at allergies, OIT, and therapies making it possible. So I hope you can join us. And please stay tuned for our 10-year anniversary celebration and summit that we'll be having in October. I'm apologizing to everyone for I'm a bit sick and coughing along the way, so my apologies. But starting with some of the few questions, I actually there's a common denominator. I think you started alluding to this, Edwin, but sustained unresponsiveness and remission and tolerance. The response for desensitization is great. Uh, and I know, as you mentioned, right, the long-term desensitization is a challenge. Is there a way, if we would take probably, let's say, a year instead of 6 months, can you give a sense to the audience of how much it decreases the efficacy or the remission at a year, 12 months, if you stop the treatment, if you stop the maintenance?
Yeah, so I mean, I think here I'll lean back on kind of the classic what we've been doing in allergy clinics for 100 plus years now is immunotherapy for pollen allergy, for environmental allergies. And what we have seen for there, as well as for venom allergies, is that even within the first few months, we do see a treatment benefit that happens. But when you discontinue after 1 or even 2 years, very often that reactivity starts to come back. And it typically has taken 3, 4, even 5 years of treatment when it comes to those immunotherapies to try to get some level of lasting benefit. And so I am seeing sort of signs in food allergy that the same is going to be the case. And so some of the shorter studies after treating for 9 to 12 months, when we've looked at some lab markers like basophil reactivity, skin testing, we see some of those reverse course and start looking like they're becoming reactive again. And in certain cases, when we've done these short food challenges, what we have seen is the patients, they don't go all the way back to baseline, but they do become reactive again. And so it does seem like the reversal after short-term treatment does occur, maybe not rapidly, thankfully, but it is going to be important for us to find any ways that we can boost this to make sure that these treatment effects are lasting much longer than they currently likely are after short treatments.
And is there enough data already to say whether OIT versus SLIT versus APID has a longer duration of effect or longer time of remission?
Yeah, I think that one right now is really difficult because every study has too many unique aspects, including just the simple routes that they're given. Um, of the published data, of course, OIT is the only one that studied 6 month remission, and in about 20% of patients, keep in mind these are young patients, toddlers, they were able to find that it's possible. Is that also going to be the case for older patients in OIT? And that's less clear. With sublingual immunotherapy, we've only looked at 3 month remission and again down in the toddler age group. And we found actually nearly 50% of patients were able to maintain that remission after 3 months. Would it be the case after 6 months? It's unclear. Again, right now, because I don't see any of these as likely long-term cures, I would anticipate that as you go longer and longer out, more people would become reactive. So that 50% perhaps comes down to 30 or 20%. And so we'll have to see. And epicutaneous, there's small bits of patients that suggest that there could be the possibility there as well. But again, a lot more needs to be studied, as well as some head-to-heads to really understand the comparison as you're asking.
Excellent. Question here from Marion. More, if you could speak more around the data for OIT and SLIT for cashew and pistachio allergies.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So, I mentioned previously about the focus on peanut, and I think that was rightfully so at the beginning because that is sort of one of the more prevalent allergies, but also because we know that most folks don't outgrow it, as well as it tended to be more associated with bigger reactions, more severe reactions. I think it made sense to start there. But I do think of that as the model allergen, not the sort of most important allergen or the only allergen. We've demonstrated that we can treat, and so the next foods are cashew, milk, egg. There are many other foods that people are allergic to. Interestingly, cashew seems to be popping up everywhere you look now, whether in clinical reports or anecdotally or in research. Cashew seems to behave in a lot of ways similar to peanut as far as frequency and even severity of reactions as well. Small studies that have been done on cashew OIT do seem to show that it could be equally effective. On the other hand, though, the OutMatch study that supported the omalizumab approval, the anti-IgE approval, seemed to suggest that cashew maybe was harder to treat. And so I do think that that is probably the next really important food for us to truly understand is it the same as peanut? Is it the same as other foods, or does it behave differently? But we are optimistic that we can treat it.
Excellent. And I would, I know Will asked a question here, hazelnut and tree nut allergies. I imagine that applies to hazelnut and other
Absolutely. Yep.
tree nut.
Yep. When it
Okay.
comes to hazelnut as well as almond and some of these foods where they have cross reactivities and depending on different parts of the world, different sort of types of symptoms, whether oral allergy based symptoms or the more classical anaphylactic, I think those will also create variables that need to be understood. But yeah, I would equally feel confident that we can treat these, but we do need to understand sort of the patients coming into the treatment very well when we start moving beyond peanut.
Excellent. A common question here. I know we're going to be talking in more detail at future seminars about combination of therapies, but what are your thoughts about combination of therapies with OIT, EPID, SLIT, to help improve the efficacy?
Yeah, I love that question. It's something that food allergy clinicians and researchers, I think, have been talking a lot about now that we actually have options available as well as options that are coming. I think the critical question in my mind is like, what is the ultimate outcome that we're seeking or the patient is seeking? And I think we really have to focus on that to decide uh, what is the merit of any kind of combinations. The reason I really focus on that is that I mentioned previously with OIT, but all the treatments do require effort, and all the treatments probably have a cost associated with it. And so it's not an automatic that, oh, we'll just combine this and it'll work, and everyone will be happy. But OIT is very difficult, and then if you add an injection therapy on top of that, that makes it even more difficult. So there has to be a reason for that. And so if we think that both treatments successfully desensitize but don't give us a long-term outcome, they in essence are kind of doing the same thing. So then you wonder, is there a benefit to both? On the other hand, if we feel like the OIT, especially in the younger kids, gives us the potential for for remission, or maybe even more than that, then it does make sense that OIT might be the way to go. But perhaps the omalizumab or the biologic can help sort of facilitate making it faster or safer to kind of get there. So these are important things that we need to talk about and make sure that there are reasons for the combinations and what does each component sort of add so that we can justify sort of the effort and the cost that would be needed.
That's a great point. We always think about it. Adding two things is simple, is additive, and there's some benefits, but also the challenges of now different administrations. It's something to take into consideration. Great point. There are two great questions here. Well, first one, it's about other comorbidities or specifically children that are being desensitized to a peanut have their immune system develop and then have a reaction to different products. Have you seen any of that where, negative implications of immunotherapy?
Yeah, so not I'm trying to understand the question exactly.
I think in this case is if people that are desensitized to one allergen, uh, especially at a very young age, is there a possibility or any experience of those then develop reactions to other allergens in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the best way I would answer that is going to be back to the prevention concept, so the early introduction. And I think what can sometimes happen is that if you get so focused in on a particular treatment, say we want to get in there and do peanut OIT, um, we may sort of either postpone or just forget to introduce the tree nuts and things like that. And so that can keep the door open to become allergic to other stuff. So I do think that it's very, very, very important to introduce those other foods sort of as soon as is feasible, even while dealing with the current allergy that they may have, because really, in essence, that patient has already demonstrated that they are at risk to become allergic to other foods as well. I don't think that the peanut OIT or the whatever OIT will directly cause other allergies, but I do think that it could sort of affect the timing of introducing other foods to try to prevent those allergies, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. Something associated with all of this have been EOE, eosinophilic esophagitis, right? Where one of the questions here is for a patient that has elevated eosinophils, are they not candidates for immunotherapy unless the EOE has been ruled out via endoscopy? Also, there's some reports suggesting that OIT may increase the possibility of EOE. Can you speak more about that?
Yeah, so I didn't go into a ton of the detail of the side effects of oral immunotherapy, but exactly as you described, one of the most common side effects we see is going to be GI problems, whether it's going to be recurrent abdominal pain or vomiting or otherwise. And in some small number of cases, this ultimately seems to lead to what looks like eosinophilic esophagitis or a disease very similar to that. Um, and so, of course, what are concerned about with EOE is if it's allowed to persist, this could lead to long-term swallowing problems and implications. Perhaps, I would argue perhaps more serious than the food allergy itself. Um, and so we have seen some dosing strategies that have been used to try to bypass this. There may be even additional therapies you can use in addition to OIT that may try to protect against this. But I do think that one thing that is exciting now versus maybe 5 years ago is that OIT is not the only option. And so, 5, 6 years ago, if they couldn't do OIT, you kind of felt like they had to go back to avoidance. And so you did really anything you could to try to get them to be able to push through, to power through the GI side effects and the possibility of EOE. Now, I think with those same patients, we have the conversation of do we dose adjust and do this? But now we also have the option of, well, there are these biologics, or maybe sublingual is a type of treatment that doesn't have the same risk of EOE, or even the epicutaneous. And so I do think that now the conversation will be, yes, we can dose adjust and try to continue on OIT, but at the same time, there are going to be other therapies that may have a different or even no risk of EOE that can be considered at the same time.
I love your slide showing the variability of response with slit, not because it's variable, but it's just a reminder that everyone is different and some people may be at more risk than others. Some people may have more benefits, and having more available therapies and support, it's really important for the entire community. One question here is there a good way to monitor efficacy of the treatment during the therapeutic phase without eating the food?
Yeah, this is a huge area of need in my mind. I think it might be the most urgent and really in my mind right now because I think like the question sort of hints at, OIT involves eating the food. So you kind of have an everyday positive reinforcement. I ate the OIT food. I didn't have symptoms, so it is working to some extent. Sublingual, epicutaneous biologics, they don't have that. So these are going to be much lower doses that are used. They're not sort of being ingested. And so there is a huge need for predictive biomarkers. Right now, what we do is food challenges, which can be very diagnostic for this. But unfortunately, what we food know is food challenges are not readily available. And so only a subset of clinics out there are actually doing a large number of food challenges. And so, uh, again, that in its own way also limits who can have access to treatment as well. Is if they don't have access to a food challenge to know that it's working, they may not start that in the first place, or it may make it more difficult to do. So I do think that the biomarkers, they're very fervently being investigated now, and I think it's so important that they come out as fast as possible because more treatments are coming. And these treatments have the promise of access to many people, but if we're stuck with food challenges, that access is still going to be very limited.
Yeah, yeah. I'll do the last question, Edwin. You've been great with it. I think you've addressed most of the questions here, but any way that have you come across any way to expedite the immunotherapy process for older, more biologically developed individuals?
Expedite meaning make the treatment work faster for that particular patient? Yeah,
Faster,
so
yeah.
there, yeah. So I think right now the combination therapy has been looked at that. So a biologic plus oral immunotherapy, that is probably the most common discussion when it comes to that question. Is protection under a biologic therapy, decrease that patient's reactivity, and then allow us to ramp up the OIT treatment faster. Right now, again, a typical buildup might take 6, 7, 8 months, really just to ensure the safety of the treatment itself. But if you have a biologic providing a level of protection, could you build them up within a couple of months? And that is something that we've seen in small studies is possible. But I think we need to understand that better and see if we can predict the people that will succeed at that with that versus the ones that maybe struggle and need the slower approach.
Excellent. Edwin, thank you so much. This has been a very informative seminar. It is a topic that we receive a lot of questions, given that unfortunately many of our members of our community are being affected by this and have either gone through OIT or EPID or SLID or are making decisions. And so we really appreciate you talking about this, giving us more detail. You see this firsthand through the clinical trials that you run. So no one better than you to give us information about this. So we really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for joining today, and stay tuned for more information on our 10-year anniversary, and hope you can join us our next seminar series. Thank you, Edwin, again.
This has been fantastic. Thank you for the invitation, Carlos.
Thanks. Have a good one, everyone. Bye-bye.